name is Wally Van Treek, and I used to manage a Showplace up in Dover, New Jersey, back from 1976 to 1978, and I ended up working there up until 1984. That was when, basically, about the New Jersey music scene. When I first started working at the Showplace really opened up in 1975. At first, it was a discotheque, and they used to just do disco, and they had bands like the Tramps and Gary Tom's Empire. And then in November, night before Thanksgiving, 1975, they did Another Pretty Face, who was a really hot local glitter band, and they had over 800 people come through the door, and it was like, they said, hey, we got to change over to rock. So they did, and in the meantime, my sister Sharon had gotten a job there, and she asked me to come by, and I was home from college. She asked me to come by and see Leslie West play. So I said, sure. Leslie West, at that time in his band, he had Mick Jones from Foreigner, he had Carmine Appice, used to be in Vanilla Fudge on drums, he had Kenny Aronoff on bass, and they were just incredible. And so they started doing more and more rock acts in '76, and a lot of the bands they had then were either bands on the way up or bands on the way down, or bands that just did clubs basically. And like I said, I was in college at the time. I decided, needed a summer job, so my sister Sharon had got me a job. Basically filling up beer bins and parking cars and everything. And the first show I worked at was Slade, and Slade basically was like, a couple of years ago. Prior to that, this is years before they had MTV and stuff like that, and they were on, Don Kirshner's rock concert, Midnight Special in concert, and they were like huge. Goodbye to Jane, you remember that? It was just incredible. So they started to get more and more recording acts. Now, I started working there full time in June. So at that time, the owners at that time were Larry Gribler and then two brothers, Steve and Ben Schiff. And they hired this fellow by the name of Joe Berger to run and design a sound system, because prior to that, bands would come in and they would just have they would just rent out a PA, and the PA that they would use, and that cuts into your profits when you're doing something like that. Well, what happened was they hired this guy Joe Berger to run and design a sound system, and the sound system he designed was just unreal. It was out of this world. It was you never heard a club have a sound system like that at all. I mean, it was on par with any small theater or a place, say like the Capitol was a place back then, the Capitol Theater in Passaic. So in July of that year, they ended up having the Ramones there, and unknown to us at this time, there was a scene, right across the river in Manhattan that was breaking. It was a punk underground scene, and this is before anybody heard the Sex Pistols or anything else, and it was there's a lot of the bands from the CBGBs and Max's Kansas City and what they were doing, it was punk rock, and what they were doing, they were taking basic rock and roll, they were stripping it down, turning it up, putting it in fourth gear, and away they went. And and what it was what was good about that was it gave a lot of people opportunities to play. I mean, because up until then, you take a look at the '70s, you had these long 7, 8, 10-minute songs. You had you had bands like the Captain Tennille on the radio. The rock was getting pretty bad, and this was just something new. And the Showplace at that time was just starting to get, they were like on the ground floor of that scene happening. And for me working there right when that was breaking, you're 21 years old. I was 21 at the time. We didn't know what was going on then. And then all of a sudden, a lot of the other bands started to come over. And like one time it was at I can't remember, it was either at a Ramones show or a Tough Darts show, and I'm in the DJ's booth. Now back then, what you used to do, between the bands, you used to just put on an album, and then just flip it over, and then that would be the changeover. Well, this nice couple comes up to me in the DJ's booth, and they asked me if I could play their single. And it was a pretty girl with blonde hair, and a very artsy looking guy. Turned out to be Debbie Harry and Chris Stein from Blondie. And up until then, nobody ever heard of Blondie in New Jersey, so I put their record on, and we ended up having them later play at the club, and they were they went over very well. But then again, more and more, we started getting more of these bands from New York, then we started getting bands across from England coming over to play, and all of a sudden, things started just building and building, and he started doing more and more recording acts. And at that time, nobody in New Jersey was doing recording acts. Not too many clubs were. I mean, maybe City Gardens in Newark might have been doing it, but I mean, the Showplace started doing it on a regular basis. And like at that time, we had like I mentioned, Another Pretty Face before, which was a huge act that was unsigned, and they were just like the top draw in the state. I mean, we had Blackfoot, that was that was a regular band, a band by the name of the Good Rats. They were from Long Island, and they just started to build them up and have them play and open up for all these different people, and they just started to really just make their own scene. But by 1977, they just came full-fledged and started doing a major recording act almost every weekend. And the list they had was like, I mean, they had UFO, Cheap Trick, Devo playing. I mean, this is when these bands were in their prime, and these bands were being booked before they actually made it. Meatloaf played there, and they were booked before they, right before Bat Out of Hell was really out. And I mean, one of my favorites, Jack Bruce, was there. And the one thing about like rock up until then, and in the punk scene, it brought back a 2 and 3 minute single song, and it was just good. And I worked there full time until 1978. I mean, some of the shows I saw were incredible. I think probably the best act that I saw was Slade. They were just phenomenal when they played there. They were just so professional. And the one thing about Slade was they actually did come back and record a live album, and I think a couple of cuts of it ended up on Live Slave Volume 2, or Slave Alive Volume 2. It's a live album, and they liked it, and it was, like I said, at that time. And then, throughout the course, we would have Leslie West come back and play a few times. You always had, like I said, bands like Another Pretty Face and Blackfoot and the Good Rats come and play. Like I worked there full time until 1978, and I decided to go back to college. And then I worked there, part time until 1984. And during that time, I worked there part time. Different bands would come in, like Benatar. U2 came, and I'll tell you, when U2 played there, they weren't that good. I mean, they were just horrible the way they came across. And we thought they'd go back to England or Ireland or break up, but we didn't. And all of a sudden, they turned out to be huge. I mean, you could never figure that. I mean, but at that time, when bands did play there in that era, a lot of them did have their own albums out and whatnot. And then I say I worked there until like 1984. One of my last shows was Black Flag when they played there, and after that I was I just went on and moved on, and actually my band ended up playing there in 1989. I went back, and I still became still was friends with the owners and whatnot. My band was at that time we called ourselves a Legend. I'm in the band The Chillers now, but like I said, during that time it was a pretty exciting time, just because all these acts were just breaking, and the scene was just breaking, and it was just to be a part of it was just pretty cool, definitely. And then you see some of your idols also, growing up. I mean, when I was in high school, Mountain was huge. And to see Leslie West play. I mean, Jack Bruce played Halloween Night, 1977, and they were just. It was just. This guy was in Cream. Now Cream was, Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker, and just phenomenal. I mean, you've seen all these people that were just you thought were just really good. So they come by and they play, and you're right there. You get to meet them, talk to them, exchange stories with them, go party with them afterwards. I mean, we had Rory Gallagher play there, 1977. 1 day's notice, guy packed the place, and that guy was just he was an Irish blues guitar player that was just phenomenal, and he just came by. And even after he was done, after it's done with the set, the band's moving out and everything, and he's still playing. He went on the grand piano that we rented. He's there playing piano for 45 minutes, just playing boogie woogie on the piano, and he was a guitar player. I mean, and like I said, at that time, another big band that was, that really, if they were handled right and they handled themselves right, could have made it. And this is with a band by the name of New York Dolls, and all of a sudden, David Johansen comes strolling in one night. And this guy, he was, I said, oh, why don't you come play here, and everything. Why don't the Dolls play here? I thought the Dolls were still together. At that time, the Dolls had already broken up. And then finally, he tried, they did come by, and it was a David Johansen group that played, and they played some Dolls material. And like I said, for what it was at that time, it was just a good part, a good thing to be a part of. That's for sure.
Yeah. Was there any local bands that you can remember that played there in like a regular rotation?
Well, the local bands that played in regular rotation, were, say, the Good Rats, Another Pretty Face. I don't want to say they're really local because they ended up having a gold record, but it was Blackfoot. Blackfoot, they had their headquarters, and they spent a lot of time in North Jersey, even though they were from Florida.
Right.
And then then one of their albums, Blackfoot Strikes, they wound up going on tour and opened up for bands like Kiss and a few other bands like that. And they ended up having a gold record with Blackfoot Strikes. But they were like around there local. And one of the best shows I ever saw was their sound check on a Sunday afternoon.
Right.
And we always had Leslie West back. We had him back 4 or 5 times. We had the Good Rat. I probably saw the Ramones probably about a dozen times there when they played there.